Yes, thank you very much, Jerry. I'm really happy to be here. Fortunately, I saw when Jane was introducing today, I'll be touching upon a variety of things that she also mentioned as important. So VR, big data, but also, well, as Kathleen mentioned, sustainability, not only being sustainable as in of continued usage, but also being sustainable in terms of our planet. So I hope you'll be enjoying this. But I also noticed that when the word crisis was mentioned, that I could almost hear you think like, well, not an entire talk about COVID-19 again, because we've heard so much about that. Well, while I think that we need to take our lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic and all the research that's been done in this area, I will also be talking about a few other crises to kind of bring a bit of variety into my talk. So I will be talking about COVID-19, but I will also be talking about our climate crisis, about the misinformation crisis, and about the health inequalities crisis. And I'm using the word crisis here as a very broad definition, so we can discuss whether these are all like proper crises to be talking about. So, as my kind of subtitle said, how a group of digital health enthusiasts may help when dealing with these crises, you may wonder, what digital health enthusiasts are you talking about? Well, that's why I wanted to tell that about a little bit about that first. Because a few years ago, together with a few of my fellow digital health researchers, we launched this special interest group in computer tailoring and digital health within the European Health Psychology Society. And a brief article in the European Health Psychologist, which is screenshotted right there, describes the background of this idea, as well as some of the results of a survey that we did among EHPS members to kind of inquire about their needs and wishes in terms of this special interest group and what it should be doing for them. And right now we have an organizing committee of 8 members coming from countries like Germany, Belgium, the UK, and also the Netherlands. And together we are the driving forces behind this special group, interest group's activities, including things like the editing of special issues in scientific journals, the organizations of webinars and workshops, especially meant for early career researchers. We also do a lot of networking events. We organize symposia and roundtables at the annual EHPS conference. But we also do some joint research, and that's what I'll be talking about to you in a minute. Well, at this moment, we have more than 100 members, and actually Kathleen was once a member when this group was initially launched. And also Jane is one of our very active members at the moment. We have more than 750 followers on Twitter, where we like to kind of highlight our plans and activities, but also put the spotlight on the research that our members are doing. So if you're interested to learn more about our group or our group's members' work, please do follow along. And well, as Jane said, we're a big fan of Twitter, so please do.
Could you move a little bit closer?
Closer to the
mic?
mic?
The mic isn't great here. No.
Okay, great. So when we initially launched this special interest group, we also formulated a mission statement that still holds today, which says to build a community of interested EHPS members to advance digital health research and to provide a forum to discuss new evidence, underlying mechanisms, and specific components of digital health interventions that may lead to enhanced behavioral outcomes. And, oh, I'm sorry. There we go. And then talking about the research that we've been doing over the past few years, I do start with the COVID-19 pandemic. Because in this global experiment on motivating social distancing, together with researchers from 89 countries, I tested whether messages that were of more autonomy supportive language had different effects on motivation than messages that were more controlling in their language. And well, autonomy supportiveness is also something that Kathleen just touched upon. And well, we also found that the autonomy supportive messages were more effective in decreasing feelings of defying social distancing recommendations relative to a controlling message. And also that a controlling message increased controlled motivation, which is actually a less effective form of motivation than more intrinsic or self-determined forms of motivation. And this work highlights the potential harm of using such shaming and pressuring language in public health communication, with implications for not only the current but also future global health challenges. But next to studying the language in which messages are best communicated, in another pandemic study, we looked at the media that people use to look up information about COVID-19 and also what kind of information they were actually looking for. And the results of this particular study showed that respondents especially sought information about the prevention of contamination, the severity of their symptoms, treatment and vaccination, and that news outlets, both online and offline, were the most preferred sources of information. But looking a bit more closely, talking about this person-centeredness, we saw that older people were actually more likely to search for information in traditional media, such as the TV, in newspapers and on the radio, while younger people more often use news websites to find information. And this suggests that depending on your target population, the use of some media might be preferred over the use of other media. Well, once we have information on the what, the how, and through what medium health information can best be communicated, intervention development can take place. And although the studies that I presented here are not necessarily, and maybe unfortunately, as such related to each other, this intervention development study is worth highlighting, as the Euro COVID-19 risk tool was developed by a large and truly international team, and many members of our special interest group were actually involved in its development. Well, the Your COVID-19 risk tool, well, some of you may know it even, consists of 10 questions addressing the risk factors for contracting and spreading the virus, followed by individually tailored feedback. All of those questions and feedback were available in 22 languages, which was facilitated by the international character of the team that was involved. And at this point, more than 60,000 users from over 150 countries have actually assessed their risk for COVID-19 using this tool. Moving on, and I have to be brief given the time that I was given, to the climate crisis. I'd like to tell you a bit about a study that we did to test the effects of communication about the environmental or health impact of people's food choices in a virtual reality supermarket. What we found in this particular study was that impact messages on the point of purchase, so messages about the environmental or the health impact of a product, are actually effective in stimulating personal response efficacy beliefs, so beliefs about what their purchase would do in terms of their health or the environment. And also in stimulating pro-environmental food choices at the virtual supermarket cash desk. These heightened personal response efficacy beliefs then also positively affected maintaining and catalyzing behavior change, which we called positive spillover, up to 2 weeks. So this was quite a short-term follow-up. What we wanted to see whether what people experienced in this VR supermarket actually translated to their behavior outside of this VR experience. And in a related study, we also investigated whether similar impact messages, again communicating about the health and the environmental impact of people's food choices, were suitable for stimulating healthy and environmentally friendly food consumption in children. And I have to mention here that in the main study that we did with adults, we presented them with impact on their cardiovascular risk and also on the deforestation of our planet. In this children's study, we presented children with images on how orangutans were surrounded by more or less trees, and how sugary consumption led to more impact on their body composition. So we try to adjust again our stimulus materials to the target audience. And although we did find that all children were actually able to recall the information that they saw in this virtual reality supermarket, only children from an average age of 10 really understood the information. But once they did understand the information, they were often aware and they felt sorry for their negative behavioral impact when it comes to the environmental appeals that we show them. Also, the children expected their behavior, like in the real world, to positively change when they would imagine these pop-ups that they saw in the virtual reality supermarket to really be applied in a real supermarket where they would buy their foods. So if I continue for a little while about talking about how we can promote a more sustainable and healthy diet, there's also some work in progress that investigates the effectiveness and feasibility of a smartphone intervention in this regard. And this intervention consists of sending text messages and providing brief individualized online feedback sessions based on app-based regular assessments of eating behavior. And for this study, first participants have actually just enrolled, so results have to be awaited for. But initial findings are expected in about 6 months' time. So if you're interested, do reach out and we're happy to keep you posted. Well, going from the climate crisis to what's going on in the so-called misinformation crisis, some exciting research is being done as well. And here I touch upon the concept that was mentioned, being big data, because what is possible with new technologies is to automatically classify big data sets, for instance, web pages or other online resources like social media posts, based on certain parameters. And in this specific study, for instance, we used supervised machine learning to automatically label information about early childhood vaccination as reliable or unreliable, where reliable, unreliable is a huge focus of discussion, but we based ourselves on current health guidelines available. So what we found that it was possible. We identified that the automated classification of online content performed really well and was particularly useful to identify reliable information. And typical words for unreliable were, for instance, doctor, immune system, vaccine damage, whereas typical words for reliable were measles, child, and immunization rates. And relatively simple classifiers like the ones that we developed and tested in this study can actually be used as a starting point to develop more complex classifiers, but also to develop, well, sort of warning tools which can help people to evaluate whether the information that they encounter online is reliable or not so reliable, and to make people more aware that they might actually encounter some misinformation when they go on the web. Well, if we talk about what we can do to combat misinformation, talking about warning tools, this study investigated whether certain text structures, in terms of headline formats being a question or a statement, and the text structures were of any use in debunking misinformation about 3 different topics. So this study looked at not only vitamin C, but also the COVID-19 vaccine and genetically modified organisms foods. And actually, the headline and structure did not matter so much because while debunking messages decreased the belief in the targeted myth in general, the beliefs and the acceptance of the debunking message were unaffected by text structures and headline formats. And in general, they were less successful when addressing individuals with strong pre-existing incongruent attitudes and a distrust in science. Well, moving on to my last crisis, whether or not we can truly speak of a crisis here is something that we can discuss. But I think it's an important subject that I would like to talk about a bit more, being health inequalities, as it's presently unknown whether our digital technologies may actually decrease or increase these inequalities. They might decrease them because of their potential for widespread adoption, but they might also increase health inequalities because not everyone has equal access to these digital technologies. So in a first attempt to determine whether digital technologies actually increase or decrease health inequalities between groups of different socioeconomic status, this systematic review and meta-analysis explored the effects of digital interventions for these groups, specifically looking at digital interventions that aimed at increasing physical activity. And it was found that digital interventions targeting physical activity do not have equivalent efficacy for people of low and high socioeconomic status. More specifically, for people of low SES, there's no evidence that digital health interventions aimed at physical activity were effective. But for people of high SES, these interventions did work. So this study actually suggests that health inequalities may actually increase due to the use of digital technologies. Well, almost taking place at the same time, another systematic review was conducted as well, which moved beyond effectiveness to also look at the uptake of digital technologies and engagement with these digital technologies. Also broadening the scope from only focusing on socioeconomic status to more possible inequality indicators next to this socioeconomic status. But it looked at mHealth specifically as one form of digital health intervention. So it was a bit different from the other systematic review that was conducted. And in this review, we actually found that there was not so much evidence for a digital divide when we looked at mHealth interventions specifically. And the evidence that we found was very mixed in nature. So there were really not strong conclusions that we could draw from this study in that regard. And we also found that some inequality indicators, like the usual suspects, like age, gender, social education, were more often reported on than other potential inequality indicators, like the location where people are based at. And only one study reported on the uptake of mHealth interventions. So we're actually following up on this line of research right now to focus more on this particular aspect and see if there's any differences in digital technology uptake. So, well, as I said, based on these findings, the study cannot really draw any firm conclusions about health inequalities being increased or decreased due to digital technology. Well, the last study that I'd like to highlight is related to the Welsh National Exercise Referral Scheme. This program aims to help members of the public to improve their physical and mental health by providing access to personalized and supervised physical activity. And people are referred onto this scheme by their healthcare provider, such as a doctor, a nurse, or a physiotherapist. And once they are referred to it, they are asked to take part in a 16-week program of supervised activity sessions. And after a national rollout of this program, it was found that actually over time, people with lower socioeconomic status and also people with more mental health problems were referred less to the program, and they also engaged with the program less. So that suggests that actually this program, although an RCT showed positive results in general, which led to this national rollout of the program, these findings do indicate that there might be a widening of inequality in referral and uptake of this program based on people's socioeconomic status and referrals for mental health. But then the COVID-19 pandemic hit and face-to-face sessions were translated into virtual sessions because they wanted to continue the program's delivery also in the pandemic times. And presently our committee member, Katie Newby, is actually leading a study that aims to understand how this virtual delivery affected whether people join the project, take part in the exercise sessions, and complete all 16 weeks of the program. And thereby she pays specific attention to these potential inequality indicators of low socioeconomic status and also mental health status. So to conclude my talk, digital health research might contribute to exploring but also understanding and changing digital or non-digital behavior using a variety of digital means, also in times of crisis. And there's a group of digital health enthusiasts who are very, very motivated to bring this field forward, willing to help. So if you are dealing with a certain issue, with a certain research question, do reach out, follow us on Twitter. Here's also our contact details. And then I'd like to thank you for the attention.